Welcome to The Bottom Line with John Harrison, your tour guide through all things financial. Build out your financial skill set with crucial knowledge and tactics and easy to follow answers to all your essential money questions. And now, your host, certified financial planner, ordained minister, multi-published author, and president of Aspire Financial Advisors, John Harrison.
We are set to go, and I would like to welcome our viewers to another episode of The Bottom Line. And I promised you last episode that we would have something special for you today, and we really do, and on two fronts. Number one, we have our first live guest on the show ever. This is something we intend to do from time to time, have other people in who can add dimension and perspective and add to our knowledge base in great ways. And so we'll be doing that from time to time. But I'm especially excited about our guest today because the Small Business Administration has designated this Small Business Week. From April 30th to May 6th is Small Business Week. And we have, if not the, certainly one of the nation's foremost experts in all things small business, and that's Mr. Jim Blasingame. He has an impressive bio. You can Google him and find a bio on Wikipedia. Most of us don't have one of those, but he started out working for large firms like Sears and Xerox and such, and then migrated into the world of small business and started a nationally syndicated radio show. I believe it was way back in 1997, so 25 years ago. And it was not only nationally syndicated on terrestrial radio, but simulcast on the internet. And what I've read is that he's done more than 1,000 live interviews per year for all of those years. And he has been a tremendous resource to the small business community. He is a columnist for various publications, including ones you've heard of like Forbes and things like that. He's been interviewed on CNN and MSNBC and just been everywhere and done everything. And so we are really excited to have as our first guest the creator of the Small Business Network, the host for many years of the Small Business Advocate radio show, and a friend of mine for many a year, Mr. Jim Blasingame. Jim, welcome to the show.
Hey, John. Hey, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing just great. Happy to see you.
Thank you. And by the way, good job on reading what my mother wrote for you to say. Thank you for that.
All right.
I want to add one thing to your comments there. One of the most important contributions in 23 and a half years of doing my radio show was having an abiding, consistent, solid, expert guest on my show on a regular basis named John Harrison.
Wow, thank you.
You were one of the pillars of my show. You were with me, golly, almost 20 years, I think. And I can find out, by the way, I can go back and find the date. But anyway, I just want you to know that what you contributed to my show was more than just being a guest on my show. You contributed some real important meat information for small businesses from a financial management standpoint, retirement, and doing it the right way. That was another part of your world, is doing it the right way. And I just always admired you for that. And I feel very honored to be here on your show today.
Well, awesome. I thank you very much for the kind words, and it's a mutual admiration thing. I really enjoyed being on the show. It was just to give our viewers a little bit of background. I had written a book years ago, Making Mammon Serve You, a biblical manual for money mastery, and hired a PR firm to help get me some exposure. And they made the initial connection between us, and we just kept going ever since. It was not.
We launched that book on my show.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really awesome. And I guess I wanted to start by asking you Given that your initial background in business was for working for some very large corporations, how did you make the migration? How did you make the transition into the small business advocate?
It was, I'm going to pick at the word you used there. You called it migration. It was more of an ejection. I was downsized twice in 18 months in the 80s. I was a good corporate employee for 23 years. I'd gone from being a delivery man to a commission salesman to management to executive level. And I was the president of a company that was owned by a larger company at one point in time. Okay. So I'd gone from driving the truck to buying the trucks, right? And if you remember, well, there was a number of things that happened that caused the downsizing of America. There was an actual event, as you may remember, in the late 70s and 80s. I got downsized twice in 18 months. And the second time I was looking, I got a phone call, 8:30 one Monday morning, telling me that, hey, it's been great, but we got a plan, but you're not part of it anymore. Wow. And so I sat down, I hung up the phone, and I sat down, and I was running a national sales organization at the time. And so anyway, I sat down, I said, well, I guess I better get my resume dusted off. And I addressed the keys, and I couldn't make my fingers work. And I sat back and thought about it for a couple of minutes, and I said, I don't need help screwing up my life. I can do that by myself. and I sat down, and my fingers worked this time, and I typed in Jim Blassingame and Associates, business consultants. My associates at the time were my Macintosh and my laser printer.
All right.
and I had always wanted to own my own business, having served customers for 20-something years. If you're a professional salesman, you're a consultant.
Right.
You're helping them solve problems. And so I just believed I could do that. And I wound up doing that. And I had another motivation. I had two teenagers and 2 mortgages. That'll roll you out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. I never knew that far back in the background, and that's it makes a world of sense. And
there's a whole generation there's a whole cohort of my generation, baby boomers, who were in their 40s and or so in those days, who found themselves. I mean, I met a bunch of folks who were like that. Yeah. That happened to them, and they just took what they'd learned and turned it into a business. It was that's what made the 90s the decade of the entrepreneur.
Yes, I mean, I'm thinking of a client that I have that worked for a very large, well-known computer firm for many years, and then got unceremoniously shown the door in one of those downsizing waves. And he told me, never again. I'm going to start something, but I'm not going to be at the mercy of that again.
Well, and within 5 years, I became unemployable. Once you get out, and even though you worked harder than you ever work in your life,
yes,
as a business owner, you finally get to the point where you become unemployable.
Right. Yeah. Unless you end up as CEO of something like, well, even if you do end up as CEO of Microsoft, you don't need the employment. But I mean, if you're something smaller than that, you've been out of the loop, and they don't want you. So, speaking of owning a business, starting a business, you see a lot. I mean, everything from people's social media profiles to just, all the videos on YouTube about everything from, the gig economy to people having side hustles to their profiles where everyone describes themselves as an entrepreneur. And I'm wondering, are there technical definitions of these words? Are they all the same thing, or are they points on a spectrum? business owner, entrepreneur, or somebody with a side hustle? How do you differentiate between those things, and if so, how?
Well, that's a really important question, and I have debated that. I've debated the entrepreneur thing with professors over the years. They like to think that an entrepreneur is only someone who has created what they call a gazelle company. They can go from 0 to 500 employees in 5 years and then go public, that kind of thing. A lot of people think that's an entrepreneur, but that's not true. An entrepreneur, the technical definition of an entrepreneur, in my opinion, is anyone who has an idea that they think they can capitalize on. Only Steve Jobs could create a solution and go find a problem.
Right.
But most people have to find a problem and then identify the solution. And that solution is their idea. Like that former employee who had been helping people solve problems with the products of their company all those years. Then they get sent, sent packing, and they say to themselves, hey, this is my opportunity to fill that niche. And they do it. Now, here's the difference. An entrepreneur is a mindset. But I know a lot of entrepreneurial minds who could never create a company for that. If you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, you also have to be a successful business manager. And I also know people who were entrepreneurs, but who were smart enough to realize they weren't good managers. So they hired a manager. And they kept themselves in the creative focus, if you see what I mean. But they were smart enough, as Clint Eastwood's Inspector Callahan said, a man's got to know his limitations.
Yes.
And they did that. I've seen founders of companies demote themselves to EVP and hire a president. They still own the stock, but they knew they weren't good. It wasn't part of them. They weren't good managers. Anyway, so back to your question, entrepreneur is the vision, but vision doesn't ride on air. It rides on performance, on dogs that'll eat the dog food. Right? You got to make something that the dogs will eat, and that's customers wanting your product, and then you have to manage it, which is your world. You have to manage it financially, and then keep it going. So, on the side hustle thing, you could say back in '89 when I started my company from scratch, I literally printed out 8 business cards on a card stock. I didn't have the perforated, and I cut them out with scissors very carefully. And by noon, I was on the street saying, "Hi, I'm Jim. How do you like me so far?"
Right.
Now you could say, I came back that day with clients, by the way. You could say that was a side hustle, meaning, so if somebody come along the next day and offered me a real job, I can't promise you I wouldn't have taken it because I had 2 kids and 2 mortgages.
Right. But
still, the side hustle is it's an augmentation. It is a supplement. It is not a business owner way of life.
I see.
Does that make sense?
It does. I like that. And it makes it also very possible, as you described, start out something that could be rightly described as a side hustle and grow into a real business.
And that has happened. That has happened with people that could do that. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, right? It really isn't all that defined. It isn't. It doesn't have rules that you have to go by. Oh no, you broke the rule. You can't come in here. That doesn't happen. There's a gazillion ways you can use the entrepreneurial thing. Here's something to remember though, really important, I think. And I think you'll agree with me on this. With few exceptions, only in America. What has made America great has been at its heart the fact that we allowed people to try.
Yes.
We didn't put barriers around them. You can't start a company So if you and I decide to start, if we hung up today and we said, let's start a company, we could go online and start a company in 90 seconds.
Yeah.
Open a bank account in 90 seconds.
Yes.
You got to be approved by a bank in other countries. And so that's got to be approved and lots of places in Europe. So we have the ability to try. In America, we have the ability to say, as I've told people have asked me, how did I do something? How did I create that or get that client or whatever? And my comment was, I didn't know I wasn't supposed to.
Right.
That's America.
Yeah, and it's really baked into the culture. It is something that I love about the country because, our heroes going back are often people who come from this entrepreneurial background. Whether you're talking about the Henry Fords of yesteryear or the Elon Musks of today, or someone who starts, someone who gets an idea, Fred Smith, I believe was his name. You could deliver something overnight. And after that, there's FedEx, and all of these things. And in this country, people get an idea and they go for it. They try it. And it's so foreign to the thinking in other places, partly because of all those bureaucratic hurdles that you mentioned. But even just the culture itself, I don't know that it occurs to people, hey, let's invent something or let's start something. So many of the inventions that the world uses came from here. And so many of the businesses that dominate economies started here because it's just part of the American experience, so to speak. And it's something maybe we take for granted too much. It's a great thing. Here's one thing, if we can, and I don't want to dwell on this too long, but was an amazing story. I said a minute ago, we believe we have the right to try. We also have the right to fail. Yes. That's the key to entrepreneurship. You can't really be an entrepreneur if you can't be comfortable with failure. Yeah. Now, when I say failure, I don't mean abject thermonuclear spin, crash, and burn failure necessarily. But if you are an entrepreneur, you're going to fail a lot of times before you land on the thing. Maybe little bitty failures, or maybe bigger ones, but you have to get comfortable with failure. But here's an interesting story. Excuse me. Several years ago, I gave a speech in Copenhagen, Denmark. And I liked, whenever I travel, I like to go into businesses and talk to them, people, the owners. And I walked into this maritime, Denmark's right there on the water. I mean, it's water everywhere. So I walked in this maritime antique shop. He had some of the most amazing brass work, ancient antique stuff there. And I was talking to the owner. And I said, what are your expansion plans? What are your growth plans? And he said, well, I'd like to open up a shop on the other side of Copenhagen. I said, what's holding you back? He said, well, I've just got to make sure everything is right. I said, so you're not going to take a risk? I said, why don't you just go for it? And I was pushing him a little bit. And he said, oh, I mean, you would have thought I threw a snake on him. Oh, no. I can't risk more than I could lose. And I didn't understand what he was saying. And I asked my hosts next day, I asked them why he acted like that. And they said, because in Europe, if you fail, your entire family fails. If you bankrupt, you're branded as a bankrupt, never to recover. Your children, it falls on your, remember the passage, the fathers have eaten sour grapes and the children's teeth are set on edge? Yes. That's Europe's approach to entrepreneurial failure. This guy that I was talking to was so afraid of failure, he wouldn't take the next risk. Wow. And so I think that's an important way to answer your question. What do you think? I think so. That covered a lot, and really, I like that. It reminds me, and I don't want to get myself too far off track, but it reminds me of a speech I saw from one of those guys in the Toastmasters national speech competitions. And he talked about failure. He had opened a franchise, a Subway sandwich shop, and it failed. And on stage in the speech competition, he's standing there and he lets himself fall face forward onto the stage and just lay out there, face down on the ground. Everyone's sort of like looking, and he's still down there a few seconds. He makes a few jokes. Am I staying down here too long, etc. But the end of his speech was this idea, and I've never forgotten it. And this has been a lot of years ago. But he said, if you're going to fall, and everybody does, but if you're going to fall forward. And when he got back up, he was ahead of where he was when he fell. And that has inspired me many a time over the years. So you actually bring up a point I wanted to ask you about, which is so many small businesses do fail, and in the ultimate sense of that they go out of business. Do you think it's because primarily there's not the ability to say, all right, I need to outsource this, or the daily management needs to be someone other than me, or is it just, I'm underfunded? What do you think accounts for the fact that such a small percentage, I think the SBA says 1 business in 3 will still be in existence 10 years after its founding. So yeah. What accounts for that?
When I started doing my show in '97, I started working very, very soon with the SBA and continued throughout my time on the radio. Great relationship with them over multiple administrations and parties. When I started, it was 50% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. When I stopped doing my radio show, it was 40% in 5 years. That's a 20% more increase in mortality.
Yeah.
That's frightening. So there are a number of things that happened and caused that. Some businesses are not serious businesses, and when they're lumped into statistics, they dilute things.
Right.
There are a lot of people who start businesses, they have no idea what they're doing. 95% of them fail. If you don't understand, as you know very well, if you don't understand that you're going to work harder than you've ever worked, if you want to quit your job and start a business because you don't want to work so hard, you will fail.
Yeah.
You will fail. Write it down. Put it right now. Just write it down. If you want to work, if you want to quit your business and your job and start a business because you think you can provide that product cheaper than your boss, he's charging too much, you'll probably fail. Mm-hmm. Because you don't know what it takes to put that product on a shelf.
Yeah. That
owner, he or she does. And so you can fool yourself that way. That happens a lot. I'm going to say though, if we have a business, now that we've segregated that, and we've got the people who have a real product, they have a real chance of surviving, you and I could go in there at some moment in time and save them with the fundamentals.
Right.
These are real going concerns that fail. Those are the ones that I grieve about, so to speak. And those people don't understand the fundamentals. They are not applying the fundamentals. And the first thing is cash flow. Nobody ever said profit is king. Cash is king.
Right.
And because you want to make a profit sustains you long term. Cash sustains you to the next hour.
Right.
The next day, the next week. That's cash. And so most of them don't understand that. I've watched it many times. You have too, I'm sure. If you don't understand that you have to have if you don't understand the fundamentals, you can have a good product, you can work hard. Now I outworked cash flow. You can do that. I did it. Because when I started my business, it would not be accurate to say undercapitalized.
More like uncapitalized.
Because that presumed you'd had capital, right? If you were undercapitalized. And so, as my dad would say, I didn't have 2 nickels to rub together, But the thing is that you can outwork yourself. You can't outwork cash. But you have to work, and you have to know what you're working toward. See what I mean? If you're working hard, but you're not solving the cash issue, then you're still not going to make it.
Right.
And I know that's rude and crude, but there's no other way to say it. Fundamentals. And one thing real quick I'd like to point out, I have 3 schools that I talk about: old school, new school, and the school. Old school are things that you and I came up on, many of which we can get rid of those. New school are the new things that are coming up now that the kids think are cool. Some of them will be, but some of them aren't. These school, those don't change.
Right.
They were here 500 years ago. They'll be here 500 years from now. Cash is one of them.
Yeah.
Fundamentals. That's the third. That's the school.
Interesting. That's good stuff. Starting a business. I'm still on that topic.
Good topic.
When someone decides I want to start a business, and you've pictured it so far as seeing a problem, and I have a way to solve that problem. I think I can capitalize the solution to that problem. Is going into business for yourself, for most people, more about following a passion or more about a calculated analysis? The reason I ask the question is because I have a hard time imagining, for instance, that the guy who owns the local Roto-Rooter franchise, and he's got 4 or 5 trucks and 4 or 5 guys, and they're out doing what they do. I can't imagine that in high school he had a passion for emptying septic tanks, but he saw that this is something that people need to have done, and they're willing to pay not to do it themselves. So I can go into. What's your take on that? Are most businesses passion-led or more analysis-led?
This is going to sound mean and cruel maybe, but it always troubled me when I heard someone say, I'm going to start this business. And I said, why? And they said, because I'm passionate about it. That always scared me. Now, passion is important because it's what makes you roll out of bed in the morning and go to work and not mind getting up early.
Right.
Because what you got to do, you got to show up. But if that's your lead response, then there's probably not enough critical mass in there to be successful. So I was passionate about business. I was passionate about B2B. I did retail. I did B2B. I like B2B better. The public will kill you. God bless them, everyone. But anyway, I was 9 years in retail, and I liked it when I moved away to go business to business. I like that kind of interaction. I was passionate about that. I was passionate about solving problems. I felt I was a good problem solver. I proved that I was. So that was my passion. But you don't need to go into business because you have a passion. You need to go into business because you want to be a business owner that is about your passion. Does that make sense?
It does. It does.
And because you've seen it. You've had people say, "Oh, this is my passion." Here's the classic train wreck waiting to happen. I want to start a business because I love people. This is the one that will just get out of the way because you don't want to get in the blast zone to this one.
Yeah.
I'm going to start a restaurant because I like to cook.
Most people don't.
I'm passionate about cooking.
In my line of work, I love sitting with people and working them through the math of what they have to accomplish as they approach their retirement and all these things. And the face-to-face interaction and watching the light bulb go off over someone's head. I love that. And it's not the majority of what I do. There's so much that's part of the business that I'm not passionate about, but it's an essential part of the compliance burden is enormous. The background management stuff, I'm not passionate about, but if I didn't pay attention to that stuff, I wouldn't have a business. It wouldn't keep going.
Well, that's the thing I think one of the great metaphors is we often call our business our baby. It's my baby, right? Yeah. Well, we know how sweet babies smell when you've just given them a bath and They're so cuddly and they're funny and they're so cute and everything, but they're not always, are they? Sometimes they stink.
That's right.
And so somebody's got to do something about that.
Yeah.
Nobody likes to change a diaper.
No.
Everybody likes to make a baby. Everybody likes to cuddle with a baby. Nobody likes to change a diaper. That's half of the business you got to be prepared to do. Yeah. And this brings me to something I've thought a lot about over the years. I think I can boil this down to two things that you have to be able to say you can do. Number one, if you don't like to work, and I mean work, if you're not prepared to work harder than ever, and you don't like it, don't become a business owner.
Right.
I love to work. You love to work. Mm-hmm. Number two, this is a little bit arbitrary, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you're not good at math, if you don't like math, don't become a business owner.
Yeah.
Because even if you ultimately hire accountants, which I did, even if you ultimately hire somebody to manage your day-to-day cash, which I did, I taught them how to do that. I was the first cash manager.
Right.
I was the first accountant.
Yeah.
But the other thing is pricing. You know how important pricing is. Mm-hmm. If you don't have it in your head, if you can't do margin in your head, so to speak, or if you don't have it living in your head so you can put it on a wheel or type it into a computer, if you don't understand that math is critical to your survival,
yes,
don't start a business. Is that too arbitrary?
Nope. That's just good sense. And it's one of those things that most people learn the hard way, I think, that, you got to know your numbers. I tell people, even when I'm talking about retirement planning, you can always tell the fairly successful person versus someone who's struggling financially, because the successful person knows their numbers. They know what their income is. They know what their expenses are. They know what their net worth is right now. They know where they need to get it to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And the average person who's maybe living a paycheck to paycheck doesn't want to know too close because it's depressing. And so they tend to fudge the numbers. I need about this and it's about that. And you got to get past that about stage if you're ever going to get anywhere, because you got to know your numbers. And, again, in my line of work, the pressure is always to try to come in at a lower price than a competitor. But there comes a point where you can't sustain the work you have to do for a client for the price that you're charging. And so you have to know what you have to get, what your minimum client size is, and things like that.
And which gets to the point where you have to either have to get that customer to pay you what you need, or you have to let that customer go.
Yes. If
they won't let you do that. Or if nobody will pay you for that, then you got to step up your product. You got to step up your game. I was talking to a client in the grocery business one time, and grocery business is hard. It's tough. It's a tight margin.
Yeah. He
said to me one time, if you're not grossing 5% per square foot, or maybe netting, I forgot. He said, if you're not netting 5% per square foot, you're not having any fun. That was how he said it.
Yeah.
Now, he had boiled this massive, convoluted way of selling lettuce and cans of beans.
Yeah.
Down to, if you're not doing 5% per square foot, you're not having any fun.
Yeah.
And you think that guy didn't know his numbers?
He absolutely did. So, speaking of which, you talk to a lot of business owners, and I remember you mentioning the guy you talked to in Denmark, in Copenhagen. As you just move around your life today, what's your general sense of the mood on Main Street? Are business owners generally optimistic? I mean, I know we're in a tough economic time right now where we've got inflation, and we're either flirting with recession or we're already in it, depending on how people look at that. But what's your general take? Long term, are people like, yeah, this is like another cycle, we're going to come out of it and we'll be fine, or are people more pessimistic than you've seen them in the past? What's the mood on Main Street?
Well, John, as you as you may know, I've published a newsletter since 1999 every week. I haven't missed an edition on Sunday afternoon since 1999. And over the last at least 20 years, we've had an online poll in that newsletter, and we posted it on LinkedIn and other places, and at least 4 times a year, I ask my audience, my online audience, what do they think about the economy, and I would do it this way: how does your business look? I'd actually poll them twice. I would poll them, how did your business do last quarter? And then I would say, how does your business look for the next quarter? And so a number of different ways. And so one of the things that over the years that I think that I got to the point where the first one would be, we're doing great. Second question response would be, we're doing pretty good. The third response would be, we're okay, but it could be better. The fourth response is, I don't think we're going to make it. Okay, so first and fourth, we're great, we're not going to make it. For most of the good times, the medium times, so to speak, though the first number and the bottom number were pretty close to the same.
Interesting.
2020, 18, 25, that kind of thing. So, but what that meant, though, was that 3/4 of the people were keeping their head above the water, usually. And the bottom 25%, those are the ones we talked about earlier. But what I started picking up on is how to tell the trend. If that top number dipped below 20% into the teens, I knew we were seeing a trend. Because those were the Pollyannas.
Right.
Those were the happy folks. And whenever they started dropping, I like to see them in the 25% range. As you may know, I also reported every month on the NFIB survey. I tracked economist of all time. And so anyway, we just did a poll. And the top group was in the teens, and the bottom group had gone up.
Wow.
So I'm going to say for this next quarter, there's a little bit less optimism. I don't think people are worried about the next 3 years necessarily. You know what I mean? I don't take that to mean that they're thinking, oh my gosh, we're running off a cliff or something here. I think they're just thinking, well, and I was talking to a one of my grocery store clients the other day. He said, well, business is pretty good, but we're noticing the basket is smaller, and so to speak, how they measure customers, So I think that's going on. And, I forecasted the 2008 recession. And I mean, not the crisis, but I forecasted the Great Recession, which many people thought started in 08. It started in fourth quarter of 07.
Yes.
And I forecasted that in December, in January, in my predictions. I forecasted, because I was talking to people. I was doing this survey I told you about. I was following the monthly NFIB, and so it actually started in the fourth quarter of 07. So small business owners, we're where the rubber meets the road.
Yes.
And that's one thing a lot of people don't realize. Wall Street can synthesize all kinds of stuff. They can short bad news, right?
Right.
Or they can turn it into bad news by shorting it and make money on that. We're planted in the ground out here. We don't have any funny money.
Right.
It's buying and selling, buy low, sell high,
mm-hmm.
and keep up with what you got and and hang on to what you got. It's pretty simple out here. And if those things aren't good,
that's the truth. I mean, we're always, to use the investment terms, we're always in a long position in our own business. And only in the world of speculation can you have a plan to make money by the failure of something.
And that's the reason why I've been a perennial detractor of Wall Street. When I was coming up, John, I'm older than you are, for a long time. And you've heard this, Wall Street is a leading indicator of the economy.
Mm-hmm.
Wall Street hasn't been a leading indicator of the economy for 20 years.
Right.
It's merely a leading indicator of itself.
Yeah.
There's no, and one of the reasons is because the top 100 companies, 60% of their business is outside the country.
Right.
McDonald's. Did you know that McDonald's does 70% of their business outside the United States?
It's hard to imagine, but yeah.
So how can their world reflect our world?
Right. That's the truth. You gave me a great segue into something I wanted to talk about, and that's some of your books. You have written, I guess, 4 or 5, but I'm particularly aware of 2. And the most recent one, the third ingredient, especially interests me because it's not just about and for, it's not a small business thing so much as it is, this is the world we live in, and this is the world that's coming. You have been called, and this is what made me think of it. You talked about forecasting the Great Recession, and the book, The Third Ingredient, has been called by many people prophetic, and I found it interesting. And I must admit, I usually flinch a little bit when I hear that word. I'm not always a big fan.
You being a minister, I can see that.
And I always think of futurists from my childhood, I guess, who told us things like we'd all be wearing paper clothes by now and things like that. But I look at this book and the third ingredient, and I don't know if I will even show on camera, but we'll talk about it. But it's amazing to me. Number one, it's already 5 years old. It came out in 2018. It seems like it was just last year or something. But this is before anybody knew about, let's say, FTX, which is the big crypto exchange that one day it was there and the next day it wasn't, and people are out billions of dollars, and they'll spend millions of dollars and many, many months, maybe years, trying to find where the money went. And it's just one of those ethical implosions. And so I was wondering if you could tell folks a little bit about what is this book, The Third Ingredient, about? The subtitle says, The Journey of Analog Ethics into the World of Digital Fear and Greed. You have a premise that starts the book, that we're moving out of the analog age and into the digital age, and that's going to have implications for how people behave toward each other in the world of business. Give us the elevator speech or the kitchen table speech about what's this book about?
Well, thank you, John. I appreciate that. You did a good job there of summarizing. I want to come back to your definition of FTX. It was here one day and it was gone the next. Does that sound like a vapor? Can you grab a vapor?
No, you can't.
You can't. So I'm a critical mass guy. I like things you can hold on to, things that are real. And so you brought up the term ethics, which this book is about ethics, and it's about our journey. That book spans 10,000 years, 8,002 BC to 2102 AD, and there are 8 stories in there. I use characters, as you know, to tell the story, mainly because I wanted to write a book about ethics, but you can't write a book about ethics in narrative form without being preachy.
Right.
And I didn't want people to think I was preaching, although I'm capable of it. I just didn't think they'd like that.
Yeah.
And so I decided to have characters tell my story. But here's something that that here's the way I like to explain to people why now is different. Because I've actually spoken to futurists about what I just said, and I've actually had futurists, older guys, older knucklehead futurists who said, oh, this will just be like all the other times we've gone through transitions. No, it won't. This is different. I mean, there are a lot of things that we've said was different that weren't, but this is. And here's why. Humans took 10,000 years to go from mammoth to mainframe. In that 10,000 years, that was an analog existence. Speed of sound, RPMs, handshake, hammer, and analog leverage. 10,000 years. So much so, ingrained in us so much that the ethical things that you and I practice diligently, consciously, we're really not that conscious. It was just who we were, how we did things, why we did things. When you and I, when you promised to be on my show, we called you or emailed you and said, can you come on the show? And you said, yes. I didn't call you up and say, now, you're going to be here, right? I didn't do that.
Right.
Because I knew you were a man of ethics. You would be where you were. I almost never had anybody not to show up. But if you didn't, well, those weren't ethical people.
Right.
So that's a simple example. But we took 10,000 years to go from mammoth to mainframe. In your lifetime, in my lifetime, that was, and by the way, that's 500 generations. In one generation of life, we've gone from mainframe to mobile. Human beings, analog human beings like you and me, analog human beings are not ready for that kind of leverage acceleration. We didn't have digital leverage for 10,000 years. Now we have it, and we've had to get ready for it and learn how to use it so it doesn't kill us in a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's too fast without us talking about it and thinking about it. And people are now doing that. Elon Musk is talking about it, right? You've heard some of his comments. But here's what's being missed. Nobody is using, I say nobody, most people are not using what I consider to be I like to get to the heart of the matter, to the Occam's razor issue, and that's ethics. And I put, to me, ethics is the catch-all phrase for values, principles, those kinds of things, morals, laws, regulation, currency. Those are all, as you know, in the book, I call those passive forces. The two active forces, fear and greed. Mm-hmm. You and I didn't have to think about that. We're afraid and we're greedy. You and I both are. Mm-hmm. We have that. We're human beings. Mm-hmm. What keeps us in check? A passive force. Did you ever go visit your grandmother and your grandfather and what would happen if you misbehaved?
I'd get in trouble.
That's a passive force. So if you left them and you had the opportunity to get in trouble and you said to yourself, I bet my grandmother wouldn't like it if I did this. That was her passive force extending beyond her reach.
Right.
Passive forces holding fear and greed into equilibrium. Digital leverage is too powerful. Digital fear and greed is too powerful for analog passive forces.
Yes.
We have to find out how to fix this. One of the things I said in the book is that we have to start saying to ourselves, just because I can doesn't mean that I should.
Right.
When you and I were coming up, if we tried to do something, if somebody tried to do something, you and I would say, and we thought it was bad, we would say, well, somebody else stop that before it happens.
Yeah.
The law or a competitor or a boss, and they did. Because it was only moving at RPMs.
Yeah.
But now things are moving at 186,000 miles per second.
Yeah.
And we've got these magic wands in our hands, and this is digital. You know, analog leverage is this, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's 1 RPM. That's 186,000 RPMs.
Right.
So that's leverage, and we're not prepared for that kind of leverage. And you're seeing it in cryptocurrency,
Mm-hmm.
seeing it in artificial intelligence.
Yes.
I'll stop with this last comment. We have to remember this. This is the ethical part. No algorithm ever wrote itself. No robot ever built itself.
Right.
Only analog humans created digital algorithms and digital robots.
Yeah.
Just because we can doesn't mean that we should.
Yeah. There's a proverb that says, all the labor of a man is for his own belly. And it puts front and center the fact that we are hardwired, self-interested. And we put that against an ideal, which is we should be fiduciary in our business dealings, putting the interest of our client or customer or colleague or whoever else, our patient, first above our own. And it is so contrary to our nature. It seems to me that the kind of failures that drove, that we saw in FTX, where the client promise was that your funds will not be lent out to anyone else, when in fact that's exactly what was happening. It seems to me that those sort of repeated failures of ethics are kind of inevitable. And you're right, there's this zero. You had time to respond to things in the analog world. In the digital world, everything is everywhere instantly, and you don't even have time to react before it's already a disaster. It's I want to encourage the viewers that usually if you hear somebody talking about a book on ethics, it doesn't sound like the most exciting read in the world. But this, because of the structure, it stories over time, and ethics is about people, and this features people in different settings. It's a fascinating book, and it's not limited to small business concerns. This is the world we all inhabit, and I would encourage people to get their hands on this, because it's unlike anything I've read. And I've observed some of the things you talked about without maybe having as succinct a way to put them. I always remember thinking, there's a certain period of time between the invention of the wheel and the invention of the automobile. And then you contrast that with the amount of time between the invention of the automobile and the invention of the space shuttle. It's almost no time flat. And that's kind of what you're describing, the accelerating pace of all of this. It's happening faster than any of us can respond to it.
Change is not new, but the velocity of change. Humans are prepared for change. We're hardwired to deal with change, but yes, we're not hardwired for this velocity of change. I'd like to make one quick point about your FTX example, which continues to be a good one. They said they wouldn't do something and they did it.
Right.
There are laws against that.
Yes.
There are already passive forces against that. You can take them to court. You can sue them for breach of contract. You can sue them for violating regulations. Pardon me. That's passive, old-time analog passive forces.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the thing that they were leveraging, they could move it faster then we could catch them doing it. They could do more damage with it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
They could the leverage is greater. Our leverage was if I wanted to tell somebody something when I was 20, I had to make if I want to tell 10 people, I had to make 10 phone calls. But now I can push a button and send it to 1 million people.
Yeah.
That's the difference. It's not that they broke contracts and broke laws. We can fix that. It's that they had the power in their hand to do damage. In the book, I called it collateral damage and impact, where I talked about, you know, the difference between in an analog world, you know, the damage you could do with that leverage as opposed to the digital world. As we know, it was billions of dollars. It was on a record scale because they had the ability to push a button and do all of that. Same thing happened in 2008 with the financial crisis.
Yes.
That was the first, in my opinion, the first real digital breach of what we're talking about right here.
Yeah, that's fascinating. One thing I know I want to ask you, because you've had so many years of experience dealing with these issues and, you know, talking about them and interviewing people and being a consultant and being a columnist, you have to have heard just a tremendous amount of advice for people who are either small business owners or thinking about becoming small business owners. So I'm going to ask you a hard question. It may not even be answerable, but is there a single most impactful piece of advice that you've ever gotten or given and said, this one thing, you know, this has made more of a difference for me, or I think will make more of a difference for listeners than anything else I've come across? Is there anything that fits that bill for you?
I'm going to answer that through my mentors. I've never had a mentor who knew he was my mentor, or she knew he was my mentor. But they were my mentors because I paid attention and I watched them. And when they spoke to me, I listened to them. And if I could say one thing to young people today, I'm not bashing young people, but sometimes they look at people who look like me and they think I don't have much that I can teach them.
Right.
Well, if you look at somebody looks like me, they probably not only made mistakes that they know how to not do again, they might have made payments on that mistake. So that's a mistake you don't forget.
Yeah.
But my mentors, a couple of my mentors told me things. They didn't realize they were mentoring me when they said it. One of them said to me, I came to him with an issue and I didn't know what to do about it. I was stuck. He said, Jim, sometimes you got a fighting chance and sometimes you just have a chance to fight.
Mm-hmm.
And when you decide which one of those you have, you'll know what to do.
Wow.
Right? And if you're an entrepreneur and a hardhead like me, you know, it probably believes in himself more than he ever had a right to believe in himself. You'll push that envelope and until it gets too expensive. And either you'll stop or the world will stop you.
Yeah.
Right? But also you have to go find out, what is this? Do I have a chance to fighting chance or just chance to fight? You have to push that envelope. So that's something, and that works for everything.
Yeah.
Keeping a customer or client, cash flow, product development, it works for everything. And another mentor once said to me one time, he said, check your position.